Hello, 8th grade. Welcome to week 4. Today is Monday, April 27th. I know I had mentioned last week questions about writing projects that you would like to do, and I'm not gonna lie, I've racked my brain and I haven't quite come up with one that I want to do yet, which is fine because I did find a section in Shirley English that we haven't gone over that I think will be super easy, and I happen to know that this is actually a pretty important thing to talk about, just from past experiences with some of the high schoolers and things like that. So one of the things we're going to talk about in your Shirley English book is in chapter 22. I believe we're only going to do lesson 1 because lesson 2 is when it gets easy, and it's really hard to teach in general, so teaching it this way is going to be even harder. So I'm just going to go over lesson 1. We're going to talk about simple forms, comparative forms, and superlative forms of adjectives and adverbs. It sounds complicated, but it's really not. It's basically an adjective adding an ER or adding an EST or adding more or most to a word. So in the PowerPoint that I gave you, I go through the vocabulary word, I talk about your etymology, I give you sentences to diagram, and I know I can't force you to diagram them, but it's really good to keep up on that a little bit. And there is going to be an assignment linked with that tomorrow, so you should take a look at some of those. So the 7 patterns are all listed there. Jot some of those down, practice a few sentences, and then take a look at my slide number 7. Starts with simple form. Simple form is simply just adverbs and adjectives. So they have the example of this is a clean restaurant and the quick player. Those are both adjectives describing nouns. I will say they got one wrong here. The restaurant is clean. Clean is a predicate adjective. They have it listed under an adverb, so I'm not quite sure why, but quickly is an adverb. Now, if you were to leave them as they are, they're called being in simple form. There's no change. It's just an adjective and an adverb. But if you go a step further and start comparing things, so when you compare two things only, it's called comparative form. So you're going to change that adverb to either have an ER at the end or to add more in front of it. It depends on the word's syllables. So for instance, the word beautiful has 3 syllables. I wouldn't put another syllable at the end and call it beautifuler. Okay, it's not a word. I would put more beautiful. And that's the comparative form of the adjective beautiful. The examples they give in your book are Becca is a better writer than John. Better is the comparative form of good. You'd say Becca is a good writer. Becca is a better writer than John. Okay, you're comparing 2 then. Good is an irregular, remember there's always an irregular in English. Good is an irregular adjective. When turning it into a comparative form, you don't just add ER and say gooder. That's wrong. You would say, and then example of quiet. He is quieter person than she is. That's comparative. You're adding ER and it works that way. However, the word quietly is 3 syllables, so you wouldn't say quietly-er. Okay, that's wrong. You would add more quietly. He talked more quietly than she did. Okay, so you want to look at those syllables. If it was already 3 syllables, it's highly unlikely you're going to add a 4th onto it, but if it's 1 or 2 syllables, you could add the ER. What I will say is, say it out loud, and when you hear it, you'll probably know whether it's right or wrong. You could look it up in the dictionary for sure, or just use your common sense, because a lot of these words you already know if more or most is appropriate or if ER and EST is appropriate. It's the same thing with superlative form. This is the superlative is like comparing it to everything else. This is the best thing of them all. Best is the superlative form of good, better, best. That's one of the irregular ones that are listed. I give you the irregular list too on the last slide, so keep going to the last slide. Robert is the best sculptor in his art class. You are comparing Robert to the entire class, okay? So superlative compares to everybody else in the class. He is the quietest person in our class. Quiet, 2 syllables, we can put that EST at the end. But quietly, remember we talked about that, 3 syllables, you're not gonna add that 4th one. So he spoke most quietly of all the students, okay? So pay attention to the syllables, use your common sense, because you'll probably know once you say it. Beautifuler, yeah, that sounds wrong. It's more beautiful, more quietly, okay? Otherwise, you can look it up in the dictionary and it will tell you the correct form of the comparative or superlative form of that adverb or adjective that you're looking at. Be careful of the irregular ones, like I said, good, better, best, well. You don't say weller, you say better is also the correct term there. Less and lesser, far and farther, few and fewer. Okay, so there's a few that are interesting and a little different, so be careful. I will say in your Google form, I don't try and trick you, so I give you. Take a look at that Google form for tomorrow, and I will see you on Wednesday.